Hello everyone, this is DJ, aka Kian, bringing you the MLP Adaptability Power Rankings. Unfortunately, I am here by myself, nobody else really wanted to join me, so here I am. And as for all MLP Power Rankings, any logos that I used are not registered trademarks of the MLP, and I did not get express permission by KHD to use them, but I used them anyways, so here we are. So, just as a forewarning, this is just my opinion. If your team is ranked lower or higher than you expect, it's just kind of because I saw something in it that other people might not have, or you didn't necessarily see, or I didn't see the vision, or kind of a variety of different things. Of course, my opinions are objectively correct, so it's just kind of the whole thing. And there's really no such thing as a truly bad team. You can win with anything, so you should always take these with a grain of salt anyways. So anyways, without further ado, let's get right into it. So, starting off at number 16, we have Pyronox, who does have the worst team in my opinion, but that's mainly just because this is a meme built around the Ruinous Pokemon, which, you know, the main thing that kind of hurts a little bit is the fact that this was a first overall pick, using that as a meme, so it kind of turns the first overall Xianpao into not as good as it could have been. Surprisingly, this team does have a lot going for it, namely that it actually has some pretty good offensive synergy, or I guess what you could passive synergy to an extent. So Xianpao and Chiyu are on opposite sides of the spectrum. You have Xianpao breaking physically, Chiyu breaking specially, and then you do have decent bulk to back it up in stuff like Tinglu, Yuxi, Azumarill. These are all things that kind of benefit that type of offense, but at the same time it has a few key problems due to the fact that it has so many dark types kind of spamming on top of each other. It does manage to kind of cover its own weaknesses relatively well. There aren't that many fairy weaknesses. It's only like 2 more weak than it is resisted, but at the same time, I mean, you do have a massive problem into fairy types. Muck does not really cover fully into it, and Tinkatuff doesn't really exist. Let's be honest here. And that's kind of the main issue, is defensively this team is atrocious into a lot of types, just again because of that dark spam. It does have some incredible hazard setting though. Tinglu is maybe the best setter in the format, for a lot of reasons, but it also has on top of that Yuxi and Quagsire, and it has a good way to set Toxic Spikes if you really want to bring Muck. It does struggle a lot on the removal side. You're kind of reliant on Oricorio. You don't want to bring Defog Hawlucha if you can help it, so that's kind of the main thing. You don't have a spinner to take advantage of your hazard stacking. And then on top of that, I mean, you don't want to be forced to run heavy-duty boots on Xianpao and Chiyu every time. You want to kind of have the variety of sets. Like Scarf Chiyu is very, very good. Life Orb or Choice Band Xianpao are both very, very good. And then on top of that, this team is incredibly top-heavy. You have basically for your top 3, you're spending 62 points, and you're not really getting a lot in return for that. And that's over half your points in 3 months. That's not a light investment at all. And it doesn't really feel like it's good to take advantage of that. The other thing that's kind of weird too is the speed tiers are very jagged. You have some gaps, so you have basically Xianpao at your top at 135 base, and then you drop down to Hawlucha at 118 base, and then immediately after that you drop down to Chiyu at 100 base, so you can get pretty easily taken advantage of kind of in that regard, because there's not good ways to kind of mitigate that. You're kind of forced into running Choice Scarf on specific Pokemon if you want to avoid that, and you don't like running Choice Scarf on anything that's not Chi-Yu. You have some very slow stuff on this team. Like, it's basically Oricorio, but again, that's not something that likes running Choice Scarf. And Uxie's not offensive enough to kind of take advantage of it. Special attack stat isn't that high, it doesn't really have that good a moveset. So, I don't know, there's just a lot going on in there. So, I mean, it's definitely, it's a solid meme effort. It's just not a very good team. I actually also did notice that there's a lot of stuff that gets taunt and encore and like knockoff and stuff, so it's actually quite possible to kind of take advantage of that and abuse setup sweepers and kind of create your own setup opportunities. It's not like this team can't just win games. I mean, it's got some fantastic threats. Shanpao and Chi-Yu are two of the scariest Pokemon, just period. If either of them get a setup, or even just are choiced and are on the field, you basically have to choose a sack most of the time. And, you know, despite the fact that Fire and Ice share a lot of common offensive traits, you know, they're strong against kind of the same types, weak against kind of the same types, they still pair up together to create this kind of overwhelmed duo that is very hard to stop, especially when you're in a situation to click Terra on Chi-Yu and it's just spamming, you know, Terra Fire Blast, Terra Dark Pulses, whatever you kind of need it to do. I don't really see the point of Terra Wo-Chien. It's kind of there to fill a quota. Like, you needed to just, oh, I need a second Terra, so I'm just going to put it on Wo-Chien. But at the same time, it does kind of mitigate its main problem in its typing, that Grass Dark is really not very good. It's got a ton of weaknesses that are just so abusable, especially U-turn. That's kind of the main problem. So having Terra on it is fine to kind of mitigate that, but at the same time, you don't want to click Terra on it when Chi-Yu exists. That thing is just way too good. So it's just definitely, like, again, it's a good meme team. It's just not, in my opinion, it's not very effective at what it's actually trying to do. So then going on, at number 15, I actually have Crows, who, this is more of a sense that I don't really get it as much. I don't think that this is a bad team. I just don't get it. For me, it feels like there's some weird synergies going on that are a little bit hard to quantify. Namely, the fact that you have Indeedee on this team, that I feel like you're trying to implement some type of Trick Room strategy or Psychic Train or something, but you kind of, that's your main form of speed control outside of webs, which I don't think this team appreciates Trick Room that much. And, like, Psychic Train is just directly anti-Ursaluna, because it really likes having Vacuum Wave available. And then I also, like, again, I just don't get it personally. I'm sure there's good ways to kind of abuse certain things. Like, it has actually some very fantastic duos that you can take full advantage of. Ogerpon Teal and Petron is a classic. Tinkaton Hydra, those both cover for each other's weaknesses very well, and you have some good ways to get stuff on the field because you have some fantastic momentum. There's a lot of things that get good U-turn option, like a U-turn, and again, this is more of a, since I just don't really, I just don't understand it as much. Of course, this is going to be really funny when I have to play you and you just completely dumpster me, right? You completely prove me wrong, but yeah. I also do actually like these Terra Captains. I think that, you know, Terra Tealpon is quite scary, Terra Hydreigon's quite scary. It is kind of an instance where you like to have both of them as Terra, so maybe a little bit much. I'm not really going to talk though, so it's not like that's really kind of a negative or anything. And I actually do think this does strike a very good balance between offense and some bulky wall breakers to kind of help punch through some problem matchups, where you have some pretty scary immediate threats in stuff like Quackleval, Terra Teal Pawn, and you have some good setup threats in stuff like Hydreigon and Thundurus, but you also have some wall breakers that can tank a hit and then fire back like Ursaluna. And there's even some like kind of niche threats in there, like Swords Dance Tinkaton could potentially put in a work for like a matchup or something. I actually don't necessarily like the defensive synergy though. This team is very susceptible to Bolt Beam. You just don't really have a good way to tank the hits, because a lot of the things, like the things that aren't weak to Bolt Beam don't enjoy switching in repeatedly, because it's basically just Delphox, Petron, and Tinkaton. None of those like switching in repeatedly, especially Petron to special attacks, and Tinkaton and Delphox don't really have good recovery, or any at all in Tinkaton's case. So that's a bit of an issue. And then I feel like this team has fake ghost resists. I don't know why, but it just feels that way, because Ursaluna is a ghost immune Pokemon, and it does do very well against it, but that feels like that's the only ghost resist. I don't really feel like Hydreigon counts. And then Indeedee obviously being weak to Dark is a major issue into certain ghost types. So I don't know, it's just one of those things that it feels fake. It's not necessarily like actually fake, it just feels fake. So I don't know. Like I said, this team is just one of those things that's really hard to rank for me, because I just don't understand it. I understand specific aspects, but I don't understand it as a whole. So that's just kind of why it is where it is. And again, just another thing to emphasize, none of the teams on here are actually bad. Like, every team has its strengths and weaknesses, and I basically took my time to really weigh the strengths and weaknesses and kind of weigh how I felt about them to other teams. And I just felt in this specific case, some of the negatives felt like they outweighed certain positives, in the sense of like just the synergy. Like, that specifically to me is just what I just don't understand. And I don't really know how I would fix it, but you probably have a lot better of an idea of how to run it than I would, so it's just one of those things that, yeah. But enough about that, because I'm just kind of blabbing on now. So on to the 14th team, which for me was Jimmy's team, which is kind of another situation of I just didn't really understand it. I get kind of the general idea, but at the same time I feel like it's a little over-reliant on Trick Room, where you have a lot of things on here that are very slow. This is actually, for me, the worst speed team in the entire Adapt Draft, where you basically have only one Pokemon above 90 base speed, which is Noivern. It's the only thing actually above 90 base speed. So you're basically trying to play to take advantage of Trick Room, but I feel like Trick Room is really hard to take advantage of. It's really inconsistent, and to top it off, you have kind of weak hazard setting and removal, where you're kind of reliant on Bronzong as your setter, and your only removal is Noivern. So that feels to me like the major problem, like the main two problems with it. But you do have some excellent abusers of Trick Room if you do it, if you're able to get it set up. Ursaluna is insane. King Gambit is the best cleaner in the game, bar none. And you have a few things that do kind of function outside of it. Blaziken's quite scary if you're able to get into the right position. Noivern's pretty good. You do have other forms of speed control, like Thunderwave. I don't really get Grimmsnarl as much. This team feels fat, so Screens feels a little bit unnecessary. And I do actually think that the Trevenant pick is a little bit of it. Like, I'm not a big fan of it. I would have much rather you got Terra Beartic to take advantage of Slush Rush, because you have a Galarian Slowking right there. And I actually do feel like this team's momentum's a little bit weird. Like, you have a few very strong pivots. You have the Slowking, you have the Rotom. I actually just learned that Blaziken gets U-turn while I was kind of ranking these, which is pretty funny. But those are kind of your main momentum. Oh, and Party Shot, Grimmsnarl. Those are kind of your main momentum generators. You don't really have anything that is really just you don't have a good way to keep momentum on your side, and you don't like having to make double switches into a lot of your stuff because very little on your team actually has recovery. And I guess like Galarian Slowking kind of likes the fact that it's Regenerator, but that's the only thing that has it. And I don't know, it's just a little bit hard to rank for me as well, because this is the type of team that you need to be very experienced in how to actually use it. I'm just not very familiar with Trick Room strats, and I just don't rate it very well. I think that it's one of the most inconsistent strategies in the game. I definitely think that this has a chance to be very solid. I just don't think it's going to be very consistent. I think that you have to very much take advantage of Terra King Gambit cleaning up in the end game after you've done some terrible damage with like Ursaluna or something. That's kind of my main takeaways from this team. So, moving on from that. At number 13, I have Izzy's team. So this is kind of one of those teams that I felt like it has a few very scary threats, but that's it. Like, you basically have, for me, Meowscarada, Annihilate, and Mew, and those are kind of your main offensive threats. Outside of that, it has a lot of inconsistencies in trying to kind of back them up in any sort of kind of meaningful way. Like, it kind of has it's one of those teams where it has some great speed tiers, has great momentum, it has some of the best hazards that we have, has great removal options, but it just feels like it's kind of lacking. Like, you're basically super reliant on, you have two setup sweepers in Terra Annihilate and Terra Mew, and then you have Meowscarada to do a little bit of breaking, but you don't really have anything outside of that. I feel like this team would very much benefit from having like one more fast offensive threat to kind of supplement having those mons on your team, because it's basically you have those as your setup threats, and then you have like Meowscarada to pivot into them. And I don't think that Treads necessarily counts. It's one of those things that's a little bit fake offense. Its damage output is actually quite low in my experience, and it kind of struggles to do anything significant. And if you're running Scarf, then you're not really taking advantage of the fact that it's one of the best spinners in the game that can also pivot. So it's a little bit tough to take advantage of that. You do actually support Annihilate very well with this team. You have some good things to take out its main checks, namely that struggles into a lot of bulky poisons, it struggles a lot into kind of very specific bulk. And then obviously things that outspeed it, like threaten to actually deal a lot of damage, specifically fast flying types. You cover all those very well. It's just a little bit hard to take advantage of when your actual fast threats are non-existent. I also do actually like the bulk that you have, because all of it's not passive, with the exception of like Arcanine. Arcanine is pretty passive in my opinion, and Hisuian Quillfish is pretty passive, but you have things that actually do deal damage, Zapdos and Prim. But at the same time, it's like this kind of a double whammy, where you're kind of both susceptible to Edgequake and Bolt Beam. Both of them do quite well into you. You have nothing that really resists both. And I also feel like this team is very fake resistant to Ghost. Meowscarada hates switching into Ghost moves, and Hisuian Quillfish has no recovery move. And then Komala, it doesn't really do anything. So, a little bit hard for me to place higher than this, because I definitely get the vision, and I really like the vision. I just think that, again, like, one more offensive threat on this team, and this team would be so good. But as it stands, it's really difficult to take advantage of the offense when you just have so few fast threats. Like, here. Actually, what I was going to look at is the difference between Treads and Meowscarada. Treads is 106 base, Meowscarada is 123 base, and there's just nothing in between that. It's like, you just can't take advantage of having things that, like this Annihilate. You just can't really deal with the really fast threats that I think are going to cause you problems. So, I guess moving on from that now, I'll move on to number 12, which is the Beardy Dragon. So this team for me is kind of in a little bit of the opposite situation in some ways. Like, not really opposite, I guess that's not what I'm trying to say. It's got similar issues in terms of the speed tier gap, where there's the gap between Spectrier and the next fastest Pokemon, Superior, which can be pretty easily taken advantage of, but it's a little bit easier to kind of take advantage of the offense that's available here. Spectrier, Hisuian Samurot's very good. The main problem with this for me is that it's got a little bit of a fake defensive core, where Terra Gliscor I'm a known hater of. I think that it's a complete waste of a Terra. And then Reververm and DNC. All three of these things don't really cover each other's weaknesses very well. And then the kind of two main nails for me with this team that make it kind of hard to use is that it's very low on momentum. There's only 3 things that actually get, well, 5 things that get pivot moves, but you really dislike running Baton Pass on DNC and Espeon. And then just some of the removal options, they just don't exist. Like, it's just, this is, I think, the only team in Adaptability that just doesn't have anything with removal, because keep in mind, this is Gen 9, so Cloyster doesn't have Rapid Spin, Gliscor doesn't have Defog, Superior doesn't have Defog. These are all things that don't have any sort of removal. And I guess you can kind of keep them off with Espeon, but so many good setters have Windbreaker, and Espeon hates switching into anything that has remote, like an attack set of above like 60. It's just so frail. And the other thing is that just kind of because of the speed tiers, because of the gap, it feels like there's a definite reliance on Scarf. So it's one of those teams where, because you don't have any removal, you're relying on Boots to get in specific things. Maybe not as much, but I mean, you don't have anything that's necessarily like super weak to Rock, closer, but or relying on Choice Scarf. Like, you really want Choice Scarf between Samurai, you really want something like Choice Scarf Mienshao. We don't like running that all the time. And then I'm just not a fan of Terra Gliscor. Terra Gliscor is fine. I think that it's actually quite an interesting addition to this team, mainly because that's kind of your main win condition in some ways, alongside Spectre. But it's also a little bit slow in some situations. Like, your team is very much outscarfable by anything with a decent speed stat, and that's kind of a death sentence to any of your setup. I will say this team has some of the best hazard setting that we have here. It's got Gliscor, it's got rocks with other rock setters, it's got DNC, so it's actually got quite good rocks, but it's incredibly poor defensive synergy on things that have, are meant to be the defensive typings. Like, Fairy into this team is insane. Reverberm, the only resist is just not great. And then I also feel like it's a bit fake on speed control, because you have your main speed control options are Thunder Wave on Sableye and Espeon, but they really dislike being against dark types, because Sableye is fully just immune by dark types, and then Espeon, I mean, you have to come in on the dark type in the first place. Espeon doesn't have a great way to break them, so it's just a bit rough. But for me, I personally rated the better momentum as a little bit higher in this case, because it does actually have some pretty decent momentum going on here. Lots of things with, well, decent specific setters of momentum, I should specify, because like that like there's, yeah, I don't know what I just said. But yeah, the momentum, get better momentum. That's what I was getting at. And then of course the removal. That's kind of the most important thing for me, is the removal here. That's just, this team is so bad into spikes, it's kind of insane. Alright, so I guess moving on from that, moving on to number 11 is Rage. So Rage here, just immediately off glance, you see the front two, and oh my god, Tyranidamus, Black. It's like staring at the boogeyman. It's just, like, you look under your bed and there's a man under there. It's just insane. Unfortunately, that's kind of where the positives end. There are actually some pretty good ground immunities. There's a lot of flying types here, things that levitate. And then there's a lot of things that have taunt, which is kind of interesting actually, just how much gets taunt in this gen. But the main problems here... Oh, and of course, good hazard setters. I mean, you have Skarmory, you have Crocodile, you have Azelf. Those are all really solid hazard setters. Main problems for me kind of start... Removal's a bit iffy. Blastoise being the only removal makes it actually pretty annoying for Kyurem and Namorous to run anything other than Boots. And those are two Pokemon that really like running other sets, so it's not ideal. Then the momentum is actually like kind of mediocre. It's not bad, but it's not great. Again, it's kind of one of those things where there's a few very solid users, but there's just not that many users. There's only 4 things on this team that get a momentum move. So it's kind of hard to take advantage of DJblak and Enamorous, because DJblak really appreciates having pivots to get it on the field safely, because its defensive typing is atrocious. But once it's on the field, it is such a threat that you have to basically choose what you have to do. You have to choose whether I sack something, whether I get something else on the field, whether I have a check for it even. But just the lack of pivots makes it very difficult to get it on the field. Same thing with the Namorous, because it's so frail that you kind of need a pivot to take advantage of it. And it does, again, this team feels so reliant on heavy-duty boots. You have at least three things that want to run it consistently. Maybe even more. Something like Blastoise likes to run it. I will say, actually, this team is very good physical defense. It's got hands, it's got Blastoise, it's got Skarmory. These are all very good physical defensive lines. So. But at the same time, Ice and Electric goes so hard into this. Like, your team is so susceptible to bullying. And it's kind of a weird thing, but this team isn't actually that fast. Talonflame is fake speed, in my opinion. Like, this thing... I'm about to be a complete hater on Talonflame for the next minute or two, but this thing is just... It feels like such a crutch to make your team look better than it actually is. Talonflame sucks. Yet it kind of inflates your speed, it inflates your ground resists, immunities rather, and it inflates your momentum, gives you another form of removal. Like, all these things that it inflates, but it's not particularly good at any of those things. So it's just kind of sitting there. And then making your team look better. I don't know. Like, I actually do feel like if Talonflame was out and then there was like an actual decent Mon with this team on minus one everything, 2 maybe, then it would be kind of a different story. But man, I don't know how to feel about it. And then Skarmory being Terra, I think that's a waste. I think there's just not really any benefits to having it Terra over Enamorous ever. Make sure there's gonna be like a matchup or two or something like Iron Defense Body Press Skarmory is gonna do pretty well, but that's kind of what you're running it for specifically, and there's just, I don't know, it feels like a waste. Especially in the face of, you could actually have something that isn't just a one-dimensional potential setup for it. So I don't know. I don't know how to really fully rate it, because, like, again, the front two are so scary. Namorous DJblak is going to do... Those are probably going to be two of the top killers the entire season. But they have to put in so much work. I didn't really talk about Hands, but Hands is pretty good. It is actually also pretty long on choice stuff, but I don't even know runs Choice Scarf in here. Like an Amorous, you pretty much are going to run Choice Scarf if you're going to want to do anything. Because you have no way to really control speed at all. So, now that we're past the talent from Hate Max, let's move on to number 10. So number 10 is actually Wolverine. This is another one of those examples where it has some very, very scary offensive threats. So, Darkrai, Gouging Fire, Over Cornerstone, these are all ridiculous to have to prep into, and they all do a very good job of actually providing some pressure. The fact that Darkrai to Cornerstone is actually a pretty solid gap in speed tiers, 125 to 110, that's also just a really big benefit. Cover each other special versus physical, and then Gouging's there as a setup threat. That's all really solid. The hazard setting on this team is so good. That's really what's going to happen when you have Clodsire, Cornerstone, all these things, Carbank, Carbank's going to fit, all these things that do really jumps and hazards. It's got solid stuff there. Massive caveat that Clodsire is a momentum just tank. Like it just sucks up momentum like a black hole. There's absolutely nothing else that's on the field. There is actually like the backbone of Corviknight, Clodsire, and Amorous T is actually pretty solid defensively. It's got a lot of good stuff going for it, and Slowking of course being number 2. And it's actually very, very, very good amount of users of Taunt, which again, I feel like every team on this has just an insane number of Taunt users. I don't know why, but just everything is Taunt this gen. The kind of main caveats for me are Corviknight is your removal, and I hate having Turtle and Corviknight for defog. That is going to be just massive, massive loss of momentum every time you have to click it. And if you don't want to run that, you're forced to run Heavy Duty Boots Gouging, Heavy Duty Boots Amorous, all these things that you don't want to run, and you lose Overcon Sturdy. You just don't like having to play into hazards with this team. And it's also actually decently low on momentum. There's like 4 things I think that actually can pivot. Yeah, 4 things. You have, which the stock actually doesn't have Slowking listed with Chill Reception, but it's only 4 things that have any momentum moves, and Gouging loves momentum. Darkrai loves momentum. Cornerstone actually loves having momentum because it has a hard time getting on the field sometimes. I'm sure you have Corviknight that kind of functions as a slow pivot, but then you're not using it as a defogger, which your team really needs, and then it gets worn down really quickly, and you have kind of a lot of problems with that. You have Slowking, which is actually quite passive outside of just spamming Chill Reception. It has a lot of problems with Dark types, which your team has an issue with, and your team has a pretty big issue with Ghost types too. Your only resist is Darkrai, and it's very frail, so it's hard to kind of actually switch into Dark types, Ghost types consistently. And then despite having a good defensive core, your team's actually quite weak to Electric and Ice. So it's kind of one of those things where against things that actually have offense, it's kind of hard to take advantage of that defensive duo. This is actually one of the teams that handles okay into Edgequake, mainly because Corviknight's actually just so good at handling it on its own. But at the same time, you're very reliant on this Corviknight as your defensive backbone, more than Clodsire or Slowking. I just don't think that I mean, they're fine mons, and it is what it is, but just the lack of momentum hurts this team a lot with these offensive threats. Like, it's kind of a blend between an offense team and a defensive team, but at the same time, it really feels like it has a bit of an identity crisis around that, if you know what I mean. Just because of how much of a sink Clodsire is, mainly. Like, the main thing with electric types is that you basically are reliant on Clodsire as your electric immunity. Everything else on your team, your 2 resists, hate getting paralyzed. And then your ice resists are Keldeo, Slowking, which, you know, they're fine, but they also, Keldeo hates switching in all the time. You don't want to have to over rely on Slowking defensively, because it's going to eventually just get worn down, especially with how bad your removal is. Spikes against your team are crazy good. So, I think, like, this is one of those teams where I'm gonna absolutely hate prepping into it, but just I'm not daunted by these defensive runs. I think that they're kind of, I'd be more than happy to punch through them. At least I would be if we didn't Terraban or Shifu single, but you know, I can keep looking back at the good old days for a little bit longer, right? Anyways, man, we're almost halfway through. I've been ending on a lot of negative notes. Let's try and change it up for the next round. Number 9, we have Ty, who has. Let's start with the negatives here. So as we all know, Shaman Sky is, in my opinion, one of the biggest frauds in all of draft. It is super reliant on actually hitting its moves, and it gets walled really easily. And actually, in general, this team is quite reliant on hitting moves, which isn't ideal, because I mean, you have Shaman Sky, you have Cinderace Pyro Ball, Icicle Crash Mamoswine, Poltergeist Bramblegast, Galvantula Thunder, which is like 91% accurate, it's still 90%, and Iron Jugulis Hurricane. Like, so many things on this team just do not want to miss their moves. So that's kind of my main issue with this. Like, this team actually is really, really solid. It's got a lot of things going for it, but just the inconsistency by accuracy, that's kind of the main issue with it, and that's what drops it down for me just immediately. And then the other thing is that it feels very reliant on webs for speed control. It's got okay speed tiers with Shaman and Cinderace. There's a bit of a gap between after Cinderace, but it's not unmanageable. But you're very reliant on the webs from Galvantula to actually kind of take advantage of some of these middle wing speed tier mods like Mamoswine. It's also kind of, as you can tell, I kind of rate Momentum very highly. Momentum is pretty iffy on this team. Basically, Sylveon hates running Baton Pass, so there's only 4 things realistically that get pivot moves. And on top of that, the hazard removal is only Bramblegast. And Bramblegast does not want to have to come every week, especially not with some of these threats that are available. Like, this team is so scary offensively too, when all the Pokemon decide to hit the moves, of course. But it just doesn't really feel like it's able to take advantage of it in some ways when it's getting worn down by spikes or stealth rocks and big force storm heavy duty boots on stuff like Shaman and Iron Jugulis. And I mean, there's some hazard setting, but it also feels a little bit iffy. Webs is probably the most consistent hazard that you're running, but Bramble, again, is kind of locked into your only spiker, and Empoleon isn't necessarily coming every week, and it doesn't want to come rocks every week. And, you know, Necrozma, Mamoswine being the other two rock setters, it's pretty iffy. And then on top of that, this team is actually quite weak to rock, so there's a pretty big reliance on boots here. So, I mean, all these things I think are possible to overcome. It's just that, you know, I'm going to keep honing in on that. That accuracy problem is huge. I can already see this team being really frustrating when just nothing is going well. All the RNG is against you. I just see that going pretty poorly. But again, I mean, actually on some positives now. Because again, I'm turning over new leaf. It's actually a very solid team to take advantage of webs. Yes, it's a bit over-reliant on it, but it's also very easy to take advantage of it. Because you have good, really strong Pokemon in kind of the middle of the pack, speedster-wise. Mamoswine specifically is a great abuser of webs. And I mean, a couple other things. Iron Jugulis abuses it pretty well. Certain variants of Empoleon can. And there's really good offense on this team. There's both good setup sweepers, there's good ball breakers, and for me, that just kind of makes it a very solid team. Just please hit all your moves, and you'll be a lot like that's the only thing. Like, just hit your moves, and this team's really good. So I guess top half now, which again, like I said, I mean, every team is good. I know I've been a little bit negative, but I like to criticize things. So at number 8 here we have Gelbel, one of our incoming French players. So here we have what I kind of define as if you are going to take a Gen 9 team and just say, okay, I want a team that I know can work. This is kind of the definition. You have Great Tusk, you have some good offense, you have Roaring Moon, you have Latios, you have the Sunsetter, which, you know, Ninetales is okay. I actually rate it pretty highly. I think that it's arguably better than Torkoal in some ways. And, you know, it's got good wall breakers, it's got good speed tiers, it's just kind of got everything you want in Cookie Cutter. This is a good team in Gen 9. That being said, because it's Cookie Cutter, there's nothing that really stands out too much for me, as in, like, oh yeah, this is super fantastic, super scary. It's just kind of got that run-of-the-mill vibe to it. I really want to hate on the mid-tier Terra Captains, by the way, but it just works here. Terra Tusk is scary, but at the same time, Hisuian Arcan's really good, Kempe's really good. I just can't hate on it. And I mean, you just kind of look at it, and kind of what I written down for what I saw the negatives. So the speed, for me, outside of Sun, can be a bit of an issue. Roaring Moon being the fastest thing, like, it's a fast Pokemon, but it's also not like that fast, relatively speaking, to certain other things. So you're kind of relying on Booster, Scarf, Sun to kind of take full advantage of it. And, you know, Latios doesn't enjoy running Scarf a lot. And then it is a bit reliant on Roaring Moon offense, in my opinion. There's good setup threats outside of it, but like, it feels like Roaring Moon is the main cleaner, and it's the like really only cleaner. Comfey is kind of a cleaner, but it's inconsistent. And then Roaring Moon is also the only ghost resist on this team. This team really struggles against ghost types. But, I mean, this team has some pretty good momentum going on. It's actually got some pretty good hazards, like the setting and removal. And Clucky's good for setting. Well, you don't want to have to run spikes every time. And Tusk, again, you don't want to run rocks on it all the time. So maybe setting could be a bit better, but removal's really good. You have the best spinner in the format, and then the Decidueye's on it for some reason, but the default is, I guess. And then some good speed control options. It's got Thunderwave, Klefki. It's got actually some good defensive synergy on top of that too, which is a little bit interesting. It's got Tusk, Weezing, and Milotic are all pretty decent defensive Pokemon. Kind of cover each other's weaknesses a little bit. Against Psychic types, it can be a bit of an issue, maybe, but that's what you got Klefki for, right? And it is a bit reliant on wall breakers, but those wall breakers are so good that I don't think it really matters that much. Because like you have Roaring Moon, which is one of the best cleaners in the game, so it'll be fine. So again, like I said, this is like literally just the textbook definition. If I saw a Gen 9 team, this is like what I'd see the definition of Gen 9 team. It's just solid. I don't really have even much more to say outside of that. It's just kind of the most simple way I'd see it. So in 7th place here, I have Scrappy, who has a pretty interesting team actually. It's kind of got the dual Terras that can potentially set up sweep on you, but I think that the main thing is that Torn is quite a hit or miss Pokemon, literally. Like, you need to hit your moves for Torn to be a good Pokemon. Sinistcha is the best spin block in the format, arguably, like outside of Golden Go. So you kind of can cut Torn some slack. You don't have to rely on it so much to do everything for you. And then there's some other really strong wall breakers. Urshifu, Scizor, and Trapdos all fulfill that role very, very well. And Dragalge, obviously with Adaptability, does very well. You are a pretty reliant on the front four for offense, in my opinion. Those are your main hard hitters. And Sinistcha, I mean, that's more of a setup threat. I don't really think that it's offense or anything. And then the actual things that hit really hard too, so the Trapdos, Urshifu, Scizor, they're pretty slow, relatively speaking. This team wants to run Scarf or speed boosting moves like Rock Polish way more than I think you would like. I think you're going to find a lot of matchups you are having to run something like Scarf or Urshifu, which is a good Pokemon, but it's not necessarily the thing you want to have to be forced to run Scarf on. And the other like kind of main issue is that there's only one Fairy Resist on this team, that being Scizor, which that's a little bit concerning, but I mean, it's got pretty good defensive typing across the board, and actually good defensive synergy outside of that. I guess Strapdos technically counts as Fairy Resist, but only once, but I'm gonna count that. The actual interesting thing here is that surprisingly momentum is, like, there's some good momentum users, but there's a couple things that are kind of fool's gold in terms of once you get in on them, they're staying in. So I don't know, it's a little bit hard to accurately rate the momentum here, because like Torn, Scizor are two insanely good pivots. Or Shifu being locked into moves a lot of the time means that U-turn's a little bit hard to use sometimes. But it's still a good pivot. And Belly Bolt, obviously. It just lost a game to Belly Bolt, so... But, I don't know, I'm actually looking at the momentum on this now, and it's a little bit better than I was giving it credit for. I don't know why I said it was iffy in lanes. It's not iffy. It's got pretty good momentum here. And I mean, it's like you just look at the positives in this thing. It's got one of the best spinners in the format in Terrapagos. It's got another spinner. It's got really good hazards. If you don't want to run hazards on them all the time. You don't want to bring Gastro in every battle. It's a little bit passive. And Sinistcha, man, it's so good on this team, in my opinion. It covers for so many of the weaknesses on this team. It's so hard to kind of abuse. And the speed tiers here are actually quite good. Again, Torn is the fastest Pokemon here, which... pretty solid. Base 121. There's no gaps at all, so you can't really be taken advantage of on that front. And there's actually, like I said, the defensive backline here is actually pretty good, and the wish support for specific things like Sinistcha and Terrapagos makes it really hard to take advantage of in a lot of cases. So again, in some ways, it's another kind of example. It's like the front 4, 5, 6 mon. It's another, I guess you could say. But yeah, this is a Gen 9 team. This is a good Gen 9 team, but I feel like there's a little bit more kind of oomph in there, specifically from Terrasin's Jaw. I think that kind of elevates the front 5 a little bit more, in my opinion. So, moving on. Perfect timing of it. To number 6, we have Marty, who is another one of our new French players, who has a Sun team, also Sun team, of course. And this is one of those really scary offensive Sun teams that walking late is just so hard to switch into. And so they're kind of covering the physical offense side of things, and Venusaur being there, well, I think Venusaur is very inconsistent. And it's kind of one of those Sun teams for me that it's a little bit hard to take advantage of. Against it, rather, because you have actual defensive synergy. So you have Slithering, Heatran, Tornado, Landers, Therian, and Articuno, so it's actually got good defensive mons. It's got good pivots. It's got excellent speed tiers that all make sense on this team. So it's kind of one of those... I have a hard time looking at this team and thinking, man, how am I going to beat this? It is actually quite limited on hazard removal. Torkoal is not a particularly good spinner, in my opinion. And there are a lot of flying types on this team. Well, 2 is a lot. Well, 3. Landa's not really good, but you are a bit over-reliant on heavy-duty boots. Torkoal, Lander, Kilowattrel, Landers likes boots, but not relying on it. And then just some hazard setting. It's got good rockers, but there's no other hazards. I mean, there's no spikes, there's no toxic spikes, there's no webs or anything. So it's very linear, and you're kind of limited on who you can actually run rocks with every week. And then I I kind of wrote this one as it's funny, but Kalatra on the Sun is kind of anti-synergy, but Weather Ball does make up for it. But the main thing is that this team actually has no ghost resist, and this team is incredibly susceptible to just getting blown out by a strong ghost type like Dragon Pulse or Spectre, or just, you know, anything along those lines. It's kind of interesting that it's a Sun team. Like you kind of look at this and you kind of are looking at the actual typings of a lot of things defensively. This is a Sun team that isn't weak to ground. Because, I mean, you basically have Heatran and Torkoal. Everything on Adaptability, which is a little bit weird on Sun. It makes sense. But everything else either resists or is immune. Or in the case of like Junior Jobbies. But like, it's just crazy to me. And then like, if you actually look at the type chart of this team too, if I do, there's not really any holes. There's a lot of good resists, there's a lot of good immunities. This team makes a lot of sense. Again, it's very scary. My main downside and why I can't personally rank it any higher is that Sun can be a matchup fish. So I can't rank it any higher. But man, what a scary team. I don't think I really got too much into the momentum. I kind of mentioned it was good momentum, but it's really, really good. Basically, every key threat on this team also gets momentum except Heatran. So, and Torkoal. Those are like the only two things that don't actually get momentum on this team that's irrelevant. They're kind of locked in on the field that really hate being abused by not having those. So it's just so easy to take advantage of the fact that it's threatening. Like, a Walking Lake just Flip turns out and on the grass type, so he turns on the field. That's what makes it scary in my opinion. Like this team specifically. Anyways, I will move on to number 5, on the top 5 now. Rounding out our trio of Frenchmen with Saint-Biard. Or Saint-Bur, rather. In my head, it's been Saint-Biard, so apologize about that. So this team is another one of those teams that just the offense is so scary. It's got, again, some of the best hazard setting in the entire division. With Gamora, Sandy Shocks, and Fortress is really scary. The Fortress, I actually really dislike Fortress. And it's actually one of those teams that I think it's kind of like you just kind of look at the offense, and it just kind of speaks for itself. You basically you have Dragapult, you have Iron Crown, you have Sandy Shocks, you have Galarian Zapdos. And most importantly, Terrazarud is your main setup threat. It's just so good on offense. And then it's not even really lacking defensively because you have some key things that are there to sponge hits from a few key threats. Volcanion and Whimsicott look really good. Bomb Snow actually sets Aurora Veil. And I don't know, it's just one of those things that it's really good. It's also got decent-ish removal. It's reliant on Mortal Spin and Rapid Spin. Rapid Spin Fortress specifically, is what I meant. But it doesn't necessarily hate hazards that much, in my opinion. Boot Spam isn't great. There is bit of a rock weakness here, but I don't think it carries that much, because it's mainly about just killing things. And, my god, the speed on this team is great. The gap between Bolt and Whimsicott is an issue in my opinion, because there are actually a lot of things that can kind of fit in between those two, but Dragon Ball's just so fast. It's great. Also, Corphish is based. Unfortunately, Corphish is not good. Otherwise, you know, it'd be better. But, Zarud being the only Ghost Resist is also a bit kind of because this team struggles a lot in stuff like Dragon Bolt. You have the other main scary ghost types, I guess it's not that big of an issue, but I guess that's really all the thoughts I have about that. It's just crazy good offense. So moving on now to number 4, we have P. McGee, or just McGee. So this team actually has made a trade going into week 2, which dropped Gligar for Rhyperior, but I will not be taking note of that for the power rankings. I'm just going to be taking note of this team as is with Gligar. So this team also has some fantastic speed. That's what happens when you have Deoxys speed. It's actually funny, I have more negatives written down than the last one, but it's more just because I think kind of the it's a little bit hard to actually write down everything when you're kind of playing. But this team has a lot going for it. Terra Wellspring, of course, existing, one of the best Pokemon. And it's actually got some pretty scary threats outside of it too. Gust Speed is an offensive threat in itself, and Golden Go can deal damage. Thunderous T is really scary. It is maybe a bit reliant on Overpond physically, but it's so good, I guess it doesn't really matter too much. And you have Incineroar to take advantage of grass types, so it's not like the end of the world. And Flamigo, but I can't leave out Flamigo. This team is also actually susceptible to Bolting. Golden Go is okay at dealing with it, but you don't enjoy dealing with it that much. It's everything similar. It's a bit route weak. There's not really... You have pretty good removal. So it's not like the end of the world, but it is at least noteworthy. Like, you kind of have to have good removal into this. Yeah, you can use Cyclizar, Cryogonal, and Weezing. Those are good removal options, especially at the Overplan. And Golden Go being on an hazard stack team is really good. The hazard stacking on this team is crazy good. Although it is losing a little bit of hazard stack capability since Gligar is being removed for a period. But and actually, there's pretty good defensive pivots on this team. You just kind of take a look. Gligar's good. Brain Weezing's a really good defensive pivot. Overpun Wellspring can function as a defensive pivot, so it's actually got some good options here. Just in general, like, verbatim, momentum is insane on this team. The momentum is insane. Just crazy good. Just so many good key things get access to U-turn. It's really hard to stay against this team or switch around because you're just gonna get pivoted on and killed by probably Bellpond. Like, I don't know. It's a little. I just really like this team. I really understand it, and I get the vision, and I like the vision. And I do actually think that the Rhyperior trade is probably a good addition, because I think that this team does need a little bit more damage output, but that does not factor into this ranking, now does it? So, I guess moving on from that, we're moving on to number 3, which, okay. So I promise, I am not like Manu, okay? So I put myself at 3rd. I actually would have put myself at 2nd, but I just couldn't. Like, I mean, what can I even really say? This team, and I tried to write down as many negatives as I could, but I don't know. I mean, the main negative is the hazard removal. Like, I only have DJblak for this, and Drachi's a little bit kind of confused on this team. I really would have liked to have been Metagross. I'm gonna use Zeb. Or, take a ton or something, but, it's just one of those things. DJblak does function very well as screens with this, because screens is pretty good. Hazards can be a bit limited. I pretty much only have rocks on 3 things, and I would like a spiker for Iron Bundle. If anybody would like to give me a good spiker recommendation, please hit me up. The main thing is, like, and then, of course, it is a little bit reliant on boots, or one-time booster items, bundles, Sneasler, and then boots and stuff like Bombi, DJblak. It's a little bit reliant on that. And my only Ghost Resist actually is Hisuian Zoroark, which definitely an issue. But I mean, come on. This team has the most insane speed I've ever seen, let alone drafted. And it's just got, like, good breakers all around. It's got good defensive pivots, too, which is a little bit interesting. Sorry, YouTube just being silly. With, Alamomola and Rillaboom, those are good defensive pivots as their front classmen and such. Drachi, it's got good options on that front. And, I kind of didn't mention this, but Webs, oh my god, Webs is a bit superfluous on this team. It's not really one of those things that I need. I have enough speed as is. Maybe I'm fighting Scarf Dragapult or something. Not that Webs actually works in Dragapult, but gotta be creative. I mean, Ravami's not really there for Webs. Yeah, it's just kind of the thing. Oh, and like, again, momentum on this team too. Like, everything gets a pivot move pretty much. So good. In fact, everything except for my last 2 get a momentum move. So, yeah. I don't even really know what else to say. I mean, obviously I'm gonna rate my own team. Like, I like my own team, but I really didn't mean to put it up this high. It's just kind of accidentally. I promise I am not like Manu, okay? See? Because I didn't put myself at number 1, and I even gave someone else number 2 over me, and that person was Zeb, who to me has probably the best offense duo in Grand Garchomp. That's just really, really good, and the hazard setting is really good. And it's got okay removal. I'm not a fan of Vandabuzz. Like, I think it's okay. And Tentacruel is fine. And, it's got some pretty good speed tiers. Nothing like too crazy. Gren's the fastest Pokemon. There's a bit of a gap between Gren and Chomp. I'm aware that Zipstrike exists, by the way, but I'm just not going to mention it. Actually being a speed tier. So you're fake. You didn't tear your Zipstrike. You're actually fake. Terra Ente is pretty scary. It's kind of a bit of a surprise factor. So. And it's actually got pretty good defensive options. You need Clefty, the Fable, which is, you know, a bit passive. It's okay. And I mean, it's one of those teams, like, the pros kind of speak for itself. I mean, you just look at, like, the offense that this team provides, and you just see it doing well. And kind of the main downsides of it for me are the momentum. It feels a bit iffy. There's a few things that don't like to run momentum every battle, but you're kind of forced to if you want to actually not be passive into things. Namely, Greninja and Mandibuzz, you don't want to have to run U-turn on them every battle. And I mean, the speed tiers are solid, but really, you have 3 base 100s. What are you? Balio's World Tour Oras Draft? Come on. So, I mean, yeah, this is one of those teams that I love the offensive synergy. I feel like there's, like, you can add one more thing to give it just a little bit more oomph. Like, maybe something kind of in between, something that's not fake speed, like Zubstracto. I'm sorry, I know you love Zubstracto. But maybe something that's not quite fake speed, that's actually between Chomp and Greninja that you're going to actually run every week. Or not every week, but at least more consistently. It's a little bit hard to slot sling in, though. But this is a very, very good team. I really like it. Moving on to the #1 team, which, you know, I promise this isn't just because he was the champion pack from last season. It's Inversify, who, I mean, come on. This is a Palafin Terra Bolt team. What else are you really even supposed to say other than that? This team is ridiculously scary. Like, you spent 43 on your first 2, and it doesn't really feel like you're losing anything. It's just, you just kind of look at what you have on the rest of your team. You have pretty solid hazards with good setters, and then 2 very good removal options in Serena and Donphan. The momentum here is actually pretty solid, although a couple things don't like having to run momentum all the time. Namely Bolt and stuff like Iron Moth, they don't enjoy being forced to run U-turn or Volt Switch all the time. And this team actually does have a bit of a fairy problem. Iron Moth being the only resist isn't ideal. Well, Orthworm exists, but Orthworm has no recovery, so it can be a bit iffy. So anything that has like fighting or psychic coverage, it's a fairy type, gives this team a lot of problems. But I mean, the main thing is just that you have basically the best, arguably the best Terra in a lot of formats. It's easily top 5 for me. Like Raging Bolt and Snorlax a bit. We can put that aside. And Palafin is very scary. And the fact that this team has a screen setter on top of it, that's so scary. And some of these things too are moving like that passives. This team has fantastic distribution of Taunt and Encore. And it's not like you're really missing out on speed tiers either by having this priority. You have good speed tiers. It's the same as the exact same base 125 to base 110 as someone from earlier, as a Wolverine from earlier. So I mean, that's pretty solid. And you're covering for some of the weaknesses, like Weavile and Iron Moth cover for Palafin's weaknesses. Palafin covers for Raging Bolt's weaknesses. So it's got a lot of good synergy going on. And you've got, like, defensively, it's a bit speed desired. There's not a lot that can switch into things. And you do have a bit of a ground problem. Outside of Orthworm, of course, but I don't know, this is just one of those teams that you just gotta look at the front 3 and you're just immediately thinking this is the best team. And just the rest of the team actually kind of shows it up for me. And if I had to basically say anything that could improve it, I don't know, Polygraph sucks. Get something that actually can do the fairy types better. But this team is fantastic. So, everyone give it up for next season's champion, Inverse Fight. I'm just kidding. We're not going to let that happen. Anyways, I really hope you guys didn't, don't crucify me too hard for it. In fact, please go throw tomatoes at KHD for any issues you have with this tune. I hope you all have good luck in your season, and if you have any problems with this tier list, then just do well. That's all you gotta do. Just play well in the season. Again, this is all just kind of subjective. I'm sorry if I kind of bashed on your team more than I felt like I was doing, and if you felt like I was doing something poorly. I don't really do PRs for that at all, so this is like my first time doing them, and nobody else really wanted to do them with me, so... anyways, thank you guys all so much for watching, and good luck in your season.